bring in Dan Perry now, former Europe, Africa, and Middle East editor for the Associated Press. Dan, welcome to you as always. Of note, President Trump will not be making a stop in Israel during his Middle East visit. You say this is a genuine geopolitical turning point. Why, and how does Israel play into this?
Well, there had been an assumption on the part of the right-wing government of Israel that Trump was basically likely to acquiesce to whatever they want to do. And that derives from the fact that he gave Israel quite a few nice little gifts during his first term, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, recognizing Golan Heights annexation, and more. But the signs are mounting that, in fact, there's a divergence of strategic interest between Trump, who wants a quick end to the war. He doesn't care about perhaps Palestinian humanitarian suffering the way that Biden might have, so he might give Israel more rope, but he doesn't want the war to go on forever. And there is a divergence between that view and the Israeli government that seems to be preparing for essentially a forever war and a permanent reoccupation of Gaza, which would be very costly for Israel, would be a disaster for the Palestinians, would involve sacrificing the hostages, and the only good thing about it, from Netanyahu's perspective, would be that it probably would preserve his coalition, because that is what his far-right partners demand. But it would be very unpopular in Israel, and it would set him up for almost certain defeat in the elections that have to happen in a little bit over a year. So I think Netanyahu was a very brilliant politician, probably sees that it's in his interest maybe to negotiate hard, but in the end to do a deal. And Trump certainly wants a deal. And in fact, Trump has already done something rather helpful 2 months ago in stating ridiculously that he's going to depopulate Gaza and the U.S. would own and buy Gaza and build resorts there. That was obviously preposterous, but it did shock the Arab nations into a new paradigm where they no longer wash their hands of Gaza. And they quickly came up with a plan. And that plan is not so bad. It's not good enough to tempt Netanyahu's right-wing government, but it's pretty close. And I have to think that even though the current tour in the Middle East has been set up as largely a business-oriented affair, this will come up because the Arabs are very unhappy about the possibility of a massive escalation of the Gaza war. Everyone's unhappy. The Israeli public is unhappy. So the stars are aligning for a deal if Trump can somehow improve upon the Arab deal that is already on the table. And I think that what that would mean is to re-establish the linkage between U.S. deals with Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel, and probably get something real out of the Arabs about demanding that Hamas disarm, as opposed to sticking around Gaza as a militia, Hezbollah-like, effectively controlling whatever new government is created there. If Trump can do this, then I think the Israeli opposition would volunteer to give Netanyahu an umbrella in parliament, and then he no longer depends on the far right. He has to have elections in a year and a half anyway. They'll set up elections for sometime later this year, or maybe they'll give him a year to do all this peacemaking. And Netanyahu, who is a cynic extraordinaire, is certainly capable of turning on a dime from extreme war to a sort of shockingly extreme version of peace. And I think it comes down to whether Trump wants to force his hand. He clearly has leverage with the Arabs. He is there to do business, and it could be that he's also there to do diplomatic business.
It's all about optics, right? And we'll see what Netanyahu does. But the Gaza Strip right now, how much has Hamas's power been diminished over the last several years, and even more so in a trip like this? What message does it send?
I think Hamas's power has not been that diminished because whereas, they've lost most of their brigades, and they've lost probably half of their fighting force, and they've lost most of their rockets. What has been diminished is their ability to threaten Israel the way they did on October 7th, not their ability to terrorize their own people, because they do have a monopoly on force, essentially. There's another group called Islamic Jihad, but they're basically aligned with Hamas. And so the default option, if Israel were to leave tomorrow, would be Hamas remains in power. And indeed, in a very sad a testament to human nature, Hamas remains very popular, certainly in the West Bank, where they haven't directly suffered from the consequences of Hamas's reckless actions. So Hamas still has power. There's been a few demonstrations against them, but not enough to really bring them down. And I blame partly the incredibly non-strategic idiocy of the Israeli government that has categorically refused to countenance the only brand that can come in to take up the vacuum should Hamas leave, which is the Palestinian Authority. Israeli spokespersons have debated me on television on various channels, actually claiming that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are the same thing. Well, there are things wrong with the PA, but no, they're not maniacal, genocidal jihadis who want only war. Indeed, the reason why the West Bank is partly pacified is muchly to do with the PA security coordination with Israel. So why did Israel block Joe Biden's plan to bring the PA back to Gaza and to organize the exile and, if possible, disarmament for Hamas? Because again, the far right in Israel doesn't want it. They want eternal occupation. They dream of compelling the Palestinians into voluntary exile. Nothing good will come of this. And I really do think that because it is so spectacularly unpopular in Israel, Netanyahu will be open to a deal that is not refusable, and a deal that involves the Arabs formally demanding disarmament of Hamas, and that involves massive Arab and Western support for the PA, maybe even including UAE and Saudi boots on the ground to help the PA police forces in Gaza, as well as huge infusion of humanitarian and monetary aid for reconstruction, plus normalization with Saudi Arabia. No way Bibi refuses them. And I really think if he wants it, it's there for the taking.
All right, Dan Perry, appreciate your points as always. Thank you.